We spent the last few videos walking you through the mechanics of moving to France, finding a place, building your rental dossier, dealing with agencies, getting a guarantee, hiring movers, all of that. But in today's video, we're going to talk about this other part that I don't really hear that much about, which is how do you make a French rental into your home? We've done this twice now. The first place we lived in long term was a 20 square meter guest house that we were crammed into. We had a baby who was just learning how to walk. We had stuff stacked everywhere like we were hoarders. The second time though, here in this house is where we finally had room to breathe, and it's made all the difference. So this video is about both. What we learned making the best of a pretty impossible situation and what changed when we finally found a place that worked for our family. I'm going to show you some small things like 10 euros worth of paper lanterns I got on Amazon, and also bigger things like finding a park that became our refuge when our actual living space was just suffocating. So first, let me talk about the place we were in prior to this house. For 15 months, we rented a 20 square meter open floor plan guest house. It had a mezzanine loft style bed that was very tiny, and we basically had stuff stacked everywhere. We had our air fryer bounced on top of the microwave, which was on top of a cart for overflow groceries. We could barely move in the kitchen. It was so small you really couldn't turn around without hitting something. The place had a tiny washing machine, but no dryer, which is pretty typical in France, but it's also pretty brutal with the baby and all of the mountain of dirty laundry that we generated every day. We would often have to do 3 or 4 or even 5 loads of wash and then find some place to hang the clothes to dry. We had clothes draped all over the house more often than not, just trying to dry. Part of what was nice about that guest house was that we did have our own private little patio and garden that was separated by a wooden privacy fence from the main garden that belonged to the main house. And our landlord was really sweet and really great, but she was a bit of a hippy-dippy type, which is a type of person I typically get along well with. But she was very much a fan of the permaculture style of landscaping, which essentially means let everything grow wild. So what that meant was we couldn't let our baby run around and play in this overgrown weed forest without fear of her tripping. There was no place for her to run around. And Geneva was just starting to learn how to walk as we were getting near what became the end of our stay. So we couldn't let her play in the yard. We couldn't let her walk outside. We couldn't let her walk inside because it wasn't baby safe. There were too many sharp edges. It was impossible to baby-proof that place. So we had to keep her in her playpen most of the time at the house. And as she was learning to walk, we were worried about stunning her growth and her development. So we knew we had to get out of there for her sake and for our sanity as well. Along the way, we discovered this amazing park that was pretty near the house, and that park became our lifeline. We became much more local and Frenchified by making these regular trips to the park when the seasons allowed. That gave Jenny room to run around and gave us a place to breathe. But the park was far enough away that it wasn't always convenient. And of course, sometimes it's raining or it's too cold or it's too hot. And Jenny needed space to grow, so we knew that we had to make a move. So we started the search for what led us to this place that I'm talking to you from today. And we made a bunch of videos about this whole online search process, using the rental websites, contacting agencies, building the rental dossier. It was very methodical and exhausting, but we found it, and it has changed everything. One of the things we've done to make this rental more of a home for us is to overhaul the lighting. A lot of rentals often come with very industrial looking fixtures or even just bare bulbs. The lights are bright and functional, but there's basically zero warmth or zero vibe, at least not a positive vibe. One of the easiest overhauls we did to make this place feel more homey to us was ordered a bunch of China balls on Amazon. We got cream, gold, khaki, and white. And those have really softened up all the lights that were often bare bulbs or some kind of a really bright industrial type of a fixture. And it just makes the whole place feel much more livable and sane. I'm a big fan of soft light. I have a direct light pointing at my face. You can see me in this room right now, but I'm a real big fan of soft light in my otherwise daily life. So that was pretty essential. Something else that we did just this last weekend was I had purchased a 10-meter string of Christmas lights and decided to decorate the ceiling in the living room, aka Jenny's room, where she's nice enough to let us keep our couch. And that is a compromise versus having an actual Christmas tree, because with the toddler, I don't really have a good place to put a Christmas tree where I wouldn't worry about her pulling it over on herself or destroying it or both. So I decided to do a little light pattern on the ceiling, and you know what? She loves it. She's fascinated by it. She loves for me to play with the different speeds and cycles on this, and she just has a ball with it. And it also makes the room just look much more festive. You know, it's already full of baby toys, and it is not going to be a formal living room in any meaningful sense anytime in the foreseeable future. So, you know, we've made it ours. You may think it's weird, and I agree, it probably is a little bit weird, but we like it, and that's what I think you should do too. You know, follow your own taste, do what makes you happy and feel comfortable, and don't worry about what an interior design magazine would have to say about it. Some other practical benefits of this particular place are that we have a space for a proper washer and a dryer, so that has been life-changing, especially with the baby. We do have a yard that she actually can use now, and that is really sweet. And we basically have enough room that we've been able to baby-proof things without making it feel like we're living in a padded cell. So I think the moral of the story that applies to anyone is that you don't need to renovate or buy a whole bunch of stuff. You just need one or two things that help the place feel more like you, and then it will. For us, it was getting the lighting right and having space for Jenny to take her next steps without us constantly panicking. Another challenge of making a French rental work, if you are not fluent in French like we are not, is mastering, or at least just managing, the communications gauntlet that you're going to have to go through. One example for us related to the gardener saga. So our landlord is a guy who grew up in this neighborhood. He's multi-generation right in this actual neighborhood, and he owns 8 houses in this neighborhood, including the one he lives in, which is right next door. His mother lives in that house right next door over here, so we're kind of surrounded. But what that means is that he books the gardener and the landscape crews to come and service all of the properties kind of all at once. The problem is he doesn't tell us when they're coming, and we had the gardener show up unannounced one day when we weren't here. I got some call from a French number, which I missed. I was in transit taking the baby to daycare, but no one left a message. No one texted me. And I got a text message from the landlord about 10 minutes later asking me, you know, are you home? The gardeners need access. And I was on my way from daycare to go into Paris. And I said, well, I can change my plans and come back and open it up. And I said I would do this. So I changed my plans. I came home and waited. And I waited, and gardeners never showed up. I never heard anything else about it. And sorting all of this out back and forth with the landlord meant that it took another full month. This was back in the summer, so everything is still growing really fast, which meant that the weeds were up to my knee by the time the gardeners finally came a month later, which meant that Jenny actually couldn't play in that yard, which I just told you was one of the benefits. Well, we know what it's like to have that taken away too, so that's no fun. The real lesson is that in France, you can't just demand service. There's a tone and a rhythm. You have to massage the relationship often just to get a 24-hour heads up, which is what I certainly expected from my previous perspective as an American. But I've had to learn to adjust, and I'm very proactive with asking for some advance notice, but you don't always get it, and sometimes you just have to roll with it. Another story that illustrates why communication is so important is that when we moved in, we needed to, of course, buy groceries. And there are a couple of grocery stores about a half mile, 3/4 of a mile away in that direction. And that's where we continued to go. But sometimes you need something just really quickly. And I found myself wishing, I wish there was a place that was just right around the corner. And after about a month of walking back and forth to those stores, one day I ran into my good French friend and colleague who lives about 3 blocks away between us and said grocery stores. He was in the grocery store that I went into, and we said hi and called up a little bit. And I had the big shopping cart to do the big shop. He was just grabbing one item because it's right around the corner from his place. And he said, "Do you shop here all the time?" And I said, "Yeah, pretty much." And he said, "Well, why don't you go to that Intermarché?" And I said, "What Intermarché?" And he said, "The one that's blah, 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 blah." And I said, "I don't see it." He said, "Oh, you can't see it from the road. It's behind the hotel. But you just walk across this little plaza and then there it is." And it turns out there is a huge, very well appointed grocery store that's about 4 minutes walk from our door. And we just didn't know it existed. There are no signs visible on the ways that we would otherwise see it. So that's kind of France in a nutshell. The best stuff is often hidden, and you might only find it through word of mouth. So don't be afraid to talk to people and ask for help and ask for input on how to improve your daily life, which is what I've really been doing a lot of these days. Now, these aren't dramatic, low moments, but they're exhausting. Every errand can feel like a puzzle until you found your places that you're going to go on a regular basis. And every interaction does require you to calibrate your tone in a language that is not your first language in our case. And you can't bulldoze through things like this with a very American directness. That just makes things worse. You need to learn how to communicate in the style and manner of the people that you're talking to, and that will make life a lot easier and a lot more pleasant for everybody. But let me talk about some high points now, which is when we really started to feel like we had made it here, or at least made our previous neighborhood our home, and now our new neighborhood is an extension of that. In our old place, there was a pharmacy that was a few blocks away, and French people are known for being very attached to their pharmacies. They have a real loyalty to a specific pharmacy. And we developed the same thing with our old place, and the actual owner and pharmacist there. We developed a great friendship, a sort of it's not exactly parasocial, but it's a very pleasant, communal feeling relationship. And we traded WhatsApps. We don't chit chat about daily events, but whenever I would go in, he happens to speak very good English. So he sort of liked to speak English with me and practice his English. But we would talk about world events and politics, US, France, and that's always kind of interesting to get his perspective on things, both here and also back home for me. But we invited him to our housewarming party back in the early summer. He couldn't make it. He was out of town, but he sent a very nice message. And I felt like, we'd crossed some invisible line where we weren't just customers. We actually, were making friends with this guy, and we felt like part of the community. Something nice that Susie thought of that really helped us to feel like part of our old daycare was she had the idea last Christmas to create custom Christmas cards for every staff member. And what she did was to write something up that's specific to that member and how they interact with our daughter, what they did for her, whether they're one of the childcare workers, whether the director or the assistant director, or one of the chefs or one of the custodians. And she wrote up something very nice and very specific about them and what we've observed about their interaction with our daughter. She wrote it actually in Chinese, then she translated first to English so I could read everything and make sure that it tracked with me also. And then she translated all that into French, and we included a family photo as well as a small gift bag of mixed chocolates that we put together. We bought a bunch of different chocolate in these little gift bags and made all these up. And we took them at times for drop off or later pickup when they would have shift changes over a week. And we gave all these out, and people were thrilled. We heard from several people how they had put the picture of us and Jenny, but I mean, she's front and center, and then, Susie and I are in the picture, but it's really a picture of Jenny, how they had put this up on their bulletin board or their refrigerator, and they were clearly moved. Several people were just visibly so pleased by this, and they continued to bring it up and to mention it. And everybody had been friendly before, but after that, me and Susie both really knew that we had found, our people that we could trust and relate to. And they always treated our baby well, but they seemed to take an even deeper interest in making sure that everything was good and getting to know us. And they made us feel like we belonged. And that's a pretty big deal when you're in a foreign country and you're thousands of miles from home and in any direction. Similar to their loyalty to their local pharmacy, French people also tend to get very attached to their boulangerie, their bakery, and we are no exception. There is a specific bakery that's on the way to and from school, and that's where we started stopping in occasionally for Jenny to get a little treat after school, to get a little croissant, or occasionally I'll get one of their nice big cookies and we'll share a little bit of it. I try not to eat too many cookies, so I don't want to encourage that too much for her either. But Jenny knows where it is, and she starts saying pan, 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 for bread, like 3 blocks away. If we're going that route, I have 2 different routes that I can take, and one route misses that entirely. And if we're taking that route, she starts saying bread, 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 pan, 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 before we ever get there. And the girl who works there is always so friendly. And there have been a few times I've stopped in on the way to the daycare to pick Jenny up without the baby. And the girl who works there, that shift, is always like, in French, she's like, "Where's your baby? Is she okay?" I say, "Oh yeah, no, she's great. I'm stopping now to get something because I'm going to take her the other way home for whatever reason, because there's other stores on the other way home that we need to go by." So it's nice to know that, that we're regulars. It's good to feel like you're actually part of the local community. The main reason I take the alternate way home sometimes, though, is because there is a old man who walks his giant, also old dog along that particular path at pretty regular times of the evening. And if I go that way, there's a really good chance that Jenny is going to see the man and the dog. And the man was, very French. And of course, you don't really make eye contact. You don't say hello to people passing on the street. That's considered weird here. But if somebody's right in front of you, or, in our case, if there's a baby interacting and cooing at your dog and you stop to pay attention, you kind of give a polite, hello, nod hello, a little, bonjour or bonsoir, depending on if it's day or night. But now this man knows us, and whenever he sees us and, walking toward him, he will make a point to kind of bring the dog closer, and to sometimes if we catch him before he's crossing a street, he will actually pause and wait till we get up close to him so that Jenny can see the dog. And it really makes her so happy. And I can tell that the old guy really enjoys seeing the cute baby appreciate his dog, and the dog seems really happy too. So, we don't know each other's names, but there's a warmth there that is, it's really hard to say how much that means, but it means a lot. It means a lot that people are nice to my baby, and it means a lot to feel like we live in a neighborhood where, that's possible. So this video has been more of a vlog style, it's not packed full of B-roll and fancy graphics and such, but I do have a list of a few things. It's sort of a soft power playbook for how you can become more integrated. And this recaps some of what I've said already. The first thing is to show up consistently, go to the same bakery or take the same routes, and you will get to see people who will begin to recognize you, and you can develop these relationships. The next thing is to really learn the micro rituals, saying bonjour or bonsoir, always saying bonne journée or au revoir when you're leaving. Also respect people's space, respect quiet hours. Don't be too terribly loud. There are certain hours of the day and night where it's not acceptable to make a ton of noise out in public. So we're usually in home long before those hours take effect. But respect the local customs and rules, and you will have a much happier time of it. You want to work on mastering the tone for the given situation. Understand that in France, relationships are far more important than the transaction, generally speaking. And relationship building is something that takes a long time. I'm really lucky that I have a French colleague who became a good French friend, and he happens to live 3 blocks away. He's been my go-to. I try not to wear him out. He has been my guy when I've needed someone to actually be French for me and help me with setting up utilities. I borrowed his ladder to hang those Christmas lights. He's that kind of friend. We're at each other's houses. We are all friendly. Our wives and kids are all very friendly. So it takes some time to build those relationships, though, and you have to approach it in the right way for it to be a good one. Finding your third places is very important. Your parks, your cafes, your stores and markets and restaurants that you like to frequent. And once you do, like any place else you've lived, make sure that you go back and you're mastering the tone, you're polite and friendly as you should be, and you're not overly friendly or making it weird with people. And over time, they'll get to know you and, they'll be happy to see you and you'll really feel like you're at home. If you're moving here with kids, lean into the parent network. We have something in common, which is that we're all trying to survive this child raising thing together. And our daycare actually has a very active WhatsApp group for the parents, and we're communicating constantly and helping each other out. And that has been invaluable to helping us not feel lost or alone in some times when we really needed some good advice, and they were our first stop. The overall tip I can give you is to be patient with the social pace. France and different parts of France all have their own rhythms. You have to figure out what the rhythm is where you live and do your best to adapt yourself and adjust accordingly and to fit in. I'm all about being an iconoclast when possible, but you definitely want to respect boundaries and customs, and life will be a lot easier and you will be a lot happier as a result. So to wrap up, I really want to say be patient with yourself and with other people and with the process. All this stuff takes time. 2 years ago, we were crammed in a tiny 20 square meter guest house, and we had to take our daughter to the park so she could run around and have room to develop. And today we're in a place that fits us really well, where we have space to do what we need to do. And we've made it our home. But ultimately, making your house a home in France isn't just about speaking perfect French or having designer furniture. It's about showing up in the spaces that you share with other people consistently, humbly, and have curiosity instead of expectation. You go to the bakery until they know your order. You smile at the old guy with the big friendly dog until he smiles back and the dog comes over to see your baby without being asked. And if you have a kid, they're your secret weapon because they can be your icebreaker when you need one. And one day, maybe 3 months, 6 months, or even a year, you'll be walking down your street and you'll realize, this isn't foreign anymore. This is just life. This video has been more of a conversation, and it sort of sets us up for next week's video. Next week, we're doing our big 2 years in France reflection. What we've learned, the hard lessons, the big wins, what we would do differently. Susie and I will both be in that. You'll get to see Susie again. It's been a while, I know. But for now, if you're in your first month of all this and everything feels overwhelming, I promise it gets easier. Just hang in there. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you next time.